What is going on, everybody? Bauer Brown here. Welcome back to the channel, guys, and welcome to the next video in the Deco house series. Okay, so looking at my screen now, for one, you can see that I changed my theme again. Just the way that I am, get a little bit bored with, I don't know, staring at the same thing day after day. So I like to change it up. If any of you guys have played around with the newer Blender, 4 point, maybe 2, I think they're up to, they really changed things up as far as their themes and stuff go, and have some pretty neat ones in there. I've been playing around with it, and with the with FS25 on the way, I'm really hoping that they upgrade the exporter, the Giants exporter, to be compatible with version 4, because we're missing out on so much good stuff. That's the only reason I use 3.6 is because it's perfectly compatible with the Giants exporter. All right, but I love 4.2, and I would really like to use that, to do all of my work. In the beginning, I did, and at that time, I thought that the exporter was working at least as well as I needed it to. But I did realize, later down the road that it was causing more issues than I was happy with. So here we are, version 3.6, which is okay. And its theme, I guess, is going to work for now. All right, so the last video, that's exactly what we were doing, right? So we were marking up all of our seams, right, and unwrapping things. Now, your UV mesh should look something pretty similar to what I have here, okay? Your UV should be pretty much straight and square, and it should occupy the majority of the UV space, all right? In the last video, we went over how to correct, some of the issues you may come across, excuse me, and what to look for when straightening out your UVs, right? So anything that's wavy, you can generally tell what doesn't look right, okay? And most of it can be corrected by either adding seams or taking seams away, all right? And then you'll end up with something like what I have here, all right? And it's very important for the next step, right? Well, mostly not so much the next step, but going into texturing, like Instamat or Substance Painter. That's where, your UV, having your UV in good order is very important. All right. So what we're going to do in this video is we're going to start creating materials, and we're going to start applying them to the faces, to our model. All right. Now, with the materials, basically what we're going to do is we're going to give each material a name. We're going to designate what the material is. For example, if it's roofing, or if it's siding, or if it's some kind of concrete. All right. And we're going to give it a very basic texture. Every material is going to have the same texture. All right. And I'll show you exactly what I mean. Okay. And then I'll show you where we go from there. Now, one thing to keep in mind as I work on things here is the order that I do these things in. And let me explain what I mean by the order. Like for marking seams, for example, it doesn't have to be done at the same time I did mine. So I built my whole model up, and then I came back after I cleaned the mesh, and then I start marking seams. All right. It doesn't need to be done there. You can mark seams as you go, and the same thing with materials, right? So you could add materials as you go. You could add textures, things like that. And as you get more comfortable with the process, you'll know what feels right to you, right? So you can switch it up and do things differently depending on the circumstances, right? Whatever you're comfortable with, and more experience and more time with Blender is basically what's going to dictate, what gets done when, what you're most comfortable with. So it's not written in stone that certain things need to be done at certain times. I just wanted to throw that out there because it's come up once or twice. And I know maybe some people do have questions about it. I know in the beginning, I thought that maybe marking seams and unwrapping the unwrapping is a certain point in your project, but marking seams can be done pretty much anytime, right? So, and the same thing with, like I said, materials and maybe some other things, right? You could even clean your mesh as you go. You don't have to wait until the very end to clean your mesh. You can keep it clean as you go, all right? Which generally you should be trying to do anyhow, all right? So I just wanted to throw that out there that, as you get more comfortable, with things, with modeling, things can be done at different intervals, right? At different times. You don't have to do it specifically at certain times. All right. So When we start out here, we have one material. It's a very basic material, and it's a coverall, right? So if we're to highlight the material and press select, you can see that the material encompasses the entire model, right? So every face has that material. Now, what I like to do in the beginning is I like to pick whichever material I think is going to be the biggest pain in the butt to work with. Maybe it's the siding or the roof, whichever has the most parts to it and seems like it's going to be the biggest pain to select every single part. That's what I will rename this base material to. All right. So in this case, I'm going to mark that as siding. All right. So I'm going to turn that into the siding. And then this way, I don't have to reselect all of these pieces, right? So I'll just start designating other faces to other materials. I'll show you what I mean. All right. So if I was to hit select now, it still shows every single piece. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to click the plus sign for a new material, click new, and we'll name the next one roof. Okay. Now I'm not going to give any of these materials textures quite yet. I'm going to come back and do that when I'm done. But again, that's one of those things that you can give it a texture right now if you want to. You don't have to wait. All right. It's just the way that I do things. Also, you can see that my siding came up as siding 0.001 and roof 0.001. That's because this is the second time I'm shooting this video, unfortunately. Same thing happened with the last video. It was delayed by several days, quite a while actually, because I shot the video like 3 different times for various reasons. And same thing this time. I had a reason that, I had to reshoot the video for various reasons. Anyhow, that's neither here nor there. So anyhow, with this roof, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to select the pieces of my roof that I want to have a certain material, right? So like this part of the roof here, I may want to have some kind of like say like an asphalt shingle or something like that. But this roof over here, I might want differently. So just this roof, I'm going to select the highlight roof and I'm going to assign that. All right. Now this roof over here, we'll start a new material. And I'm going to call that one porch roof because I'm going to do something a little bit different with that one. Maybe I'll do, I don't know. Maybe I'll give it like a corrugated steel or something a little bit different, right? So it's not going to match what's going on with this roof, which is fine. Now, with the way that I do my materials, I try to keep them to a minimum. Not only, well, I don't know how to explain this. There's 2 different ways. Now, you should know by now, there's 2 different ways that we could be doing this. We could be using the base game textures and using their texture atlases, in which case every one of these materials will be exported with the model. All right. So when it ends up inside of Giants Editor, you'll be able to see every one of these materials. Now, since I'm putting this model into Substance Painter, I'm going to be deleting every one of these materials. Once I'm done, I'll be deleting them. I know it seems very counterproductive, but it's just my process, the way that I do things. And the way that I do things is not the way to do them. I just want to get that out there also. All right. There's many different ways, to get things done, and people do things different ways. This is just my workflow. It's neither, it's not the best way. It's not necessarily the wrong way or the right way. It's just my way. Okay. But I will be deleting these. So it really doesn't matter what you name them. And I do try to keep them to a minimum only because like going into Substance Painter, having so many materials, well, it's not so much that it's when I get into the UV space, what I do is I assign vertex colors to every one of these materials. And the add-on that I use is I use text tools here. You can see here where I have this color ID. All right. Well, this is how I assign my colors. And right now I can only get 20 colors out of it. All right. So I try not to go over 20, but it's not a big deal if I do, because, there's other ways I can assign other colors. I'm just not very good at it. So I hate messing around with it. So it just makes it easier for me if I try to keep everything within the 20 colors. All right. Not a big deal if I go over, not a big deal if you go over either. All right. So you can see what I have here now. So when I select siding, all right, you can see that the roof is not highlighted. Oops. And neither is the porch roof because I assign those to different materials. All right. So that's what I meant about, taking the most Whether it's your biggest area or just the more complicated area, that's what I rename that main material to. All right. And then from here, you're just, like I said, you're just going to go to each one of these materials. That generally it's a material that you want to be a different texture, right? So if I know that this is going to be my foundation, all right, I'll give that its own material. So I'll start another one here and we'll call that one foundation, like so. All right. And then I'll assign that and I'll just keep going right down the list, right? So I'll go through the spouting. I know that's going to have a different material. Any of my trim work, that'll probably all be the same material. The insides of these windows here, like these pieces in here, that's going to be a different material. Doorknob will be a different material. The doors. So you get the idea, right? I don't need to explain all this to you. Now, here and there, what you can do, and it's very helpful, is when we have things like the stairs, we have this walkway here, we have a driveway, a foundation, and a back patio. Every one of those is going to be one type of concrete. Now, it is helpful if you group them together, like maybe the stairs and the sidewalk is maybe the same as this foundation, or it's the same material as this back patio, right? So you don't have to have, 4 or 5 different concretes going on. All right. But you can keep them separate if you want. If you have a vision in your head and you have a certain way that you think you want to do things, that's fine. But like I said, I try to keep it to a minimum if I can, but not a big deal if I don't. All right. So I guess for the sake of trying to speed this video up a little bit and move things along, I'm not going to have you watch me go through every single one of these materials and assign them to a texture. All right. So what I'll do now is I'm going to, like, the next one I'll do is, like, say, the trim work. But I will give you one pointer. One of the ways that I find the easiest when I assign these is if I go into X-ray mode. All right. And I just find that much easier down the line in some instances to be able to select my faces, right, for these materials. But, that's not the only way. Like I said, that's just one way that I like to do it. There's also, you can press C on your keyboard. Now, I think I just made the back patio, I just made that part of my trim work. So when I hit trim and hit select, as a matter of fact, none of them are showing up. That garage should be showing up and it's not. No biggie. I'll redo that. But anyhow, like hitting C on your keyboard, right, brings up that circle and you can start selecting things that way. This was all covered in my Blender tutorial series, right? Like Blender for beginners. So you should be semi-familiar with the different ways that you can pick faces. All right. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to jump ahead and I'm going to go through and I'm going to make a different material for all of my different textures. Right. And I want you guys to do the same. Just for now, make the material and assign it to a face. Don't worry about textures or anything like that. When I get back with you guys, I'll have all of my materials created and then we'll go through and we'll create the texture that's going to go on here and then we'll take it from there. Okay, so I will see you guys in just a little bit. And by that time, we should both have all of our materials created.
2 hours later.
Alrighty, I am back and I finished my list. I have all of my materials are created. How did you guys make out? You should have a list that looks something like what I have here, every one of my materials. All right. Now, a good way to go about refining your materials. And what I mean by that is we'll start with this top material here, right? The siding, because that encompassed everything. All right. And what I'll do is I'll go into in the wireframe mode here, into my X-ray mode. I just noticed that I always call it X-ray mode, wireframe mode. All right. And then I'll hit select. All right. So here you can see that just my siding is selected. All right. Which is what I want, but it's inevitable that you're going to miss pieces, right? So maybe it's part of the window trim. Maybe you'll see part of the foundation, doorknob, something. You're going to see something that highlights along with the siding. And you don't want that to be the siding. So that's the way to go through and spot the pieces that you missed that belong to something else, right? So maybe part of the porch, part of the railing, rain spout, you get the idea, right? So that's the other benefit with using that main material, right? That material that included everything, because this way, when you miss something, you'll be able to spot it very easily, right? So your siding will highlight as well as all of the other pieces that you missed, right? So it makes it easier to go back, spot those pieces, and assign them to the materials to where they belong. All right. And then from there, what I'll do is I'll click off of it, click my next one, roof, and I'll make sure just my roof is highlighted. All right. And I'll do this for each one of the textures. I'll go down through every one of them. We got the porch roof. Okay. Roof trim is just the roof trim. No problems there. Roof under, which should be just the bottom sides of my roof. We'll select that. Yep. And that is just the bottom sides. Okay. And I'll do this for every one of them. All right. Foundation. So you guys should do the same. Go through and make sure that you didn't miss anything, because it's not a big deal. It can be corrected in Instamat and Substance Painter without much of an issue. But it just makes life a lot easier, on yourself when you get into Substance Painter and you find out that, your maybe your rain spout has a brick texture, right? So like I said, it can be corrected, but easier to just avoid that and have everything nice and clean inside a blender before we even export it out to Substance Painter. All right. So from here, once you got that done, you got everything cleaned up, all, every face, every material is assigned, to the right objects, right? So every material is assigned to the proper faces. We can go through and we can start giving these a texture. Now, like I said, they're going to get the same texture. So don't get too carried away here. What we'll do is we'll go down here to where it says base color. We're going to click on that. We're going to click image texture and we're going to click new. All right. Now with new, what I'll do is I'm going to click up here on width. I'm going to click, hold it in, drag it down, and I'm going to hit 2048. All right. Because I'm going to use a 2K texture. Now, if you did a different type of house, maybe you're working on something smaller like a shed or something huge like a mansion, you might want to go smaller or larger with your texture, depending on what you have in mind. All right. But this house here is perfect for a 2K. So that's what I'm going to go with. And then generated type here, I am going to go with UV grid or color grid. I'm sorry, not UV grid. UV grid is the black and white textures. The color grid is what I want. All right. So I'm going to select that, hit OK. All right. So now that just assign that to my roof. Let me get this up here really quick, or to my siding. I'm sorry. So now when I go into material preview, you can see that, my siding is now that color grid. All right. Now what I'll do for the next texture, I'll go down the roof, hit base color, image texture. Now, instead of repeating that process, I'm just going to go to this image here. All right. I'm going to drag that open and I'm just going to pick untitled. All right. So I'm basically giving it the exact same texture as the one before it. Right. So this is what I meant earlier when I said every one of these materials gets the same texture, all of them. All right. And what I'm going to do from here is I'm going to start, once these are all assigned, I'm going to start realigning my UVs, right? My textures. And I'll show you what I mean by that when we get there. All right. So if you're following along, what I want you to do now is just to keep going through your list like I'm doing here. Go to image texture, untitled. It's really easy. I mean, it's repetitive, but it's easy. So you'll get a pretty good feel for what you need to do here. Like I said, it's just a preference that I do it this way. There's no specific reason that I'm doing this at the end. This could be done as you go along. It's just the way that, I end up doing it. Most of the time, the reason for it is as I'm working, it's different compared to when I'm working on my own than when I'm making a video, right? So when I'm making a video, things are going slower. I'm explaining things. It's a lot easier to just assign these things as I go. But when I'm working on my own, I'm cruising right along. Things are coming together pretty fast, much faster than you did when I was first learning. But now, things cruise right along, and it just slows me down having to stop, assign a texture to it, and keep moving along. I'd rather just, wait until I got to the end and then I can cruise through the same way, that I'm doing now and just reassign everything to a texture. All right. Now I haven't counted my textures. I guess I can do that really quick and see what I came up with here. Let's see what we got. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22. All right. So I got 22 textures. I went over the 20 that I initially had in mind. So what I can do now is I can either go back and combine 2 textures, or I'm just going to have to squeeze in 2 extra colors, vertex colors, which is probably what I'll end up doing. Is I'll put an extra 2 colors in there. Not the end of the world, not difficult. For some reason, I'm just not good at vertex coloring. I tried getting into it using different applications, using just the Blender default. And yeah, I don't know. It's not complicated. It just I wasn't really grasping it the way, maybe as quickly as I wanted to, or as well as I wanted to. I'm not sure how I want to put that. But anyhow, I found the add-on with text tools ended up being, really nice. It worked out really nice for me. So I just stick with the 20 just because it works well with text tools. Wait, is it text tools? I got that wrong, don't I? Let me go into my UV here. Oh, no, it is text tools. Okay. Didn't sound right for some reason when I was saying it. I thought maybe I had it wrong. All right, so let's go to railing here. I guess I'll quickly finish these up and then I'll show you what we're going to do next here. Because the next step is going to take a little bit. It's not going to be, crazy complicated or anything, but just like everything else, there's, it's monotonous and there's a bit to it, right? So we'll just finish adding these. All right, image texture. Entitled, and then the last one. All right, image texture, untitled. Okay, now the reason that I use this color grid is you can see here how on my roof, right, this one's kind of turned to the side, right, and I don't really want that. I want all of my textures oriented the same way, right? So when I put like say roof tiles on here, shingles, those shingles are going to go from side to side, right? It's going to go from this side over here to this side here. Well, I don't want that. I want them to go from top to bottom. All right. So what I'll do is I'll get into my UV editing space here, right? I'll make this a little bit smaller. Really, it doesn't really matter. But I'm going to select this here, right? And hovering over top of my UV space, I'm going to let's see here. Get my keypad. I'm going to hit R for rotate and then a -90. Okay. And you'll get used to like -90. If you're spinning to the right on this side, if you're looking at it, if you want to go like this one, I had to spin to the left, right? So if I go Control Z, right? Oh no, I would want to spin to the right. So this would spin to the right. To me, that would be 90 degrees. But if you look over here, it's actually -90 degrees. You'll get used to it after a while. It's all right. So it's R -90. All right. So this way now, when I look at it and when my tiles show up, they're going to show up this way. And again, this is one of those things that could be corrected inside of Substance Painter, but then it's a real pain in the butt if you have to go through and correct too many of these, right? 1 or 2 that you missed is not a big deal. But too many, it's a major pain in the butt. All right, so this one needs to spin to the right, and that would be negative. So we'll hover over top of our UV space, or -90, and there we go. Okay, so those 2 are situated. And I'm going to do this for literally every one of them. Now, with this in mind, right, with what we're doing here, with rotating everything, you're going to have a pretty fair idea of what your texture looks like. For the most part, it's not vitally important as long as all of your textures point in the same direction. Okay. So let's take our trim work, for example, here, right? So if I grab the trim work, I'll grab each one of these. Basically what I want to do is I'm going to look, the way that I do it is I'll click one of them and I'll see that this one's oriented vertically. All right. And then I'll click on the next one and I'll see that that one's also oriented vertically, which is nice. Even though it's horizontal up here, I want them all to be going in the same direction. Okay. So I can see that this one's also vertical. And then that last one, again, is vertical. Now, if for one of these was, this one was horizontal on my UV space, I would rotate that so it's vertical. Now, it doesn't necessarily, whether this uh, texture, like you can see the letter E here, doesn't matter if that's right side up or upside down, as long as it's oriented in the same direction. All right. So you don't have to get that nitpicky about it, that you have to make sure they're all, right side up, upside down. So like this one here, I'm going to rotate that one 90 degrees. All right. So that one's standing up and down. Like I said, not a big deal as long as you have everything pointing in the same direction. Now, the only thing I don't worry about is my glass, right? Because there really is there's no design, there's no pattern to it. It's just like either a blackish color, grayish color, right? So there's no shingles, there's no like a brick texture, no like a wood grain or anything like that. That's not going to look right. All right. And I'll do this for each one of these is I'll make sure they're all pointing in the same direction. All right. And as long as they're pointing in the same direction, you're good to go. You'll know right away when you get into Substance Painter that you miss something, because, your wood grains will look pretty good, except for that one that just stands out because it's pointing in a different direction. All right. So I go through each one of these. So we'll go through the siding, and the siding is definitely important. Right. And it doesn't matter if it's, I don't want to say it doesn't matter if it's pointing up or down or side to side, as long as they're in the same direction. I try to keep them up and down, because if you look at the textures, those usually the way the texture goes, right? You're looking at it, you're not looking at it from the side. Now, if I were to keep all of these on their side, right, say it doesn't matter as long as they're pointing in the same direction, what I would have to do inside a Substance Painter is I would have to rotate all of my textures 90 degrees. Like that particular texture, when it applied it would apply, my boards would be going up and down, and I don't want that. So I would just have to rotate, that entire texture 90 degrees, and then it would look right again. All right. So you can see over here, looking in my UV space, right? You can see that there's like the cutout for the doorway. So here you can tell that it needs to spin 90 degrees. And then over here, it would have to spin to the left, which I would consider negative 90. Maybe it's just me. It's what I have in my head. All right. But anyhow, we'll rotate. We'll hit R 90 degrees. All right. And then we'll do the same thing for here. Get these all pointed in the same direction. And trust me, this is going to make life so much easier, when it comes to texturing inside. Oops. All right. So I goofed that one up, and I do that a lot. I'll goof it up and send it in the wrong direction. Now, what you need to not worry about right now is in your UV space, right? You can see that you have things overlapping. They don't look as good as they did before. So you're going to make a bit of a mess out of this as you go. Don't worry about that. We're going to pack our UV mesh, and I'll explain again when we get there what UV packing is. All right. And it's basically just going to reorganize our mesh for us and get it looking really nice. Right. And there's a way to do it. There's an add-on that I use. I use UV Packmaster, which costs a couple bucks. So that may or may not be something you're interested in. You may have to look into other add-ons, or maybe just use the default, Blender application, or not Blender application, but Blender has a way to do this by default. All right, negative 90. All right, so I'm going to leave you guys to it. Just do the same thing. Like I said, just go through, realign every one of your textures to the way that you want them to face. Pay particular attention to areas that have a definite pattern to them, right? So your roof shingles for one, maybe your siding, if that's going to, especially if it's going to be like brick or just regular siding, like, vinyl siding or something like that. It's, important that it all goes in the same direction. Window trim, same thing. So basically anything with a pattern to it, right? So it doesn't matter what it is, if it's like a wood grain or if it's a brick texture, just try to keep everything in the same direction. So like I said, it takes a little bit to go through and check every one of them. Now, sometimes I'll either miss something or I'll just get lazy and say, all right, so far they've all been good. So, all of them are probably good. And that's where you get burned. you get inside of Substance Painter and you realize, shoot, not every one of them were good. And yeah, so it is what it is. But like I said, I'll check these. I'll check the railings here. And I'll make sure that all of these are pointed in the same direction. All right. And so far they are. It looks like it put just about everything vertically. All right, so I'm going to leave you guys again, right? I'll leave you to it. Like I said, some of you guys may be following along. So take the time, go through your model, select, every one of these. Now what's going to happen, and what I said about, making sure you go through with when you're assigning your seams and stuff like that, and to make sure everything is correct as far as that goes, what'll happen is as you're going through your model here, right, you might come across something like, oh, shoot, I missed that. All right. So what'll happen is when you correct it and you add a seam, since you're in live unwrap, it's going to re-unwrap everything. So everything that you just oriented and, you know what I mean, everything you just rotated and pointed into the right direction is going to unwrap all over again. So you're going to have to go through and do it all over again. All right. So one thing you could do at this point, if you wanted to, is go up here to your sync selection. You could turn that off, and then you can turn off your UV live unwrap. All right. And what that'll do is it'll ensure that if you missed anything and you have to unwrap, you have to add a seam, it's not going to like re-unwrap everything, but that's not really fixing anything either, because, if you miss something, you want to unwrap it again, right? Like maybe it depends on what the piece is. So you're going to have to use your own judgment on that. Like say, for example, if I miss something like on this window, like there should definitely be a seam there, then I know it's throwing off my UV space and it needs to get fixed. All right. So like you can see right now, if I was to like say this line right here, right? Let's take this line and I was to mark that as a seam. All right. You can see what just happened there. My roof, everything is all out of whack again. Everything just went all crazy and nutty, and I have to go back to every one of those. And that's usually the way it works, right? It's usually at the very end when you're just about finished rotating all of your faces or your UVs. That's when you find the piece that you missed, and you have to do it all over again. Trust me, I've done this several times on some models, right? So, and it's like with anything else, the more that you do it, the easier it's going to get, the better you're going to get at it, and you'll miss less and less as time goes on. And then other times I won't notice it until I get inside of Substance Painter when I go to apply a texture to something and it just looks terrible and there's no easy way to fix it unless I go back into Blender and redo all of my faces again for the umpteenth time. All right. So that's why I said it's you have to, if you're texturing outside of the base game textures, right? You're not using the texture atlases or any of the base game textures. You're using Instamat or Substance Painter. This is what I've been saying all this time about being very particular with your models, that things need to be done well, right? So everything needs to be, marked well. It needs to be unwrapped well, the whole 9 yards, right? And that includes orienting your faces. Now, I'm not sure how many of you guys are familiar with Substance Painter. That seems to be one of those applications that there's a price tag involved with it. So, a lot of people may want to stick with the free option, like Instamat. And trust me, I do not blame you, not one little bit. It's exactly the way I started out. Until I knew this is something I really wanted to do, I didn't sink money into those programs, right? I used what was available to me. All right. So you may not be working with Substance Painter at all. Now, I wish I could be more help with Instamat. So far, at least, at this point in time, I don't know enough about Instamat. I haven't used it enough to be of much help. Hopefully somewhere down the road, I'll teach myself, I'll get better at Instamat. And then, maybe we could do some basic tutorials, or, we can go over some things as far as that's concerned. All right. Because I feel like it's kind of a letdown when, you follow a whole tutorial and things are coming along nicely. You're learning a lot. And then you finally get to a point where the guy is using Substance Painter and you just don't have that. That sort of stinks. Right. Now, if Substance Painter is something that you are thinking about, and I know that I've mentioned this in the past, all right, you don't have to go strictly through Adobe. and get yourself onto their subscription plan, because I'm not a big fan of it. It has, it has its perks. It really does. One, subscribing to what I do, I get bunches of like free materials. I probably have a couple hundred free materials right now that I could just go in. So if I need like a brick or a cobblestone or some kind of roof shingle, I don't have to pay for it. I can go find quality, textures that I can use for free. All right. And then the other thing is it does make it affordable, right? So the package that I have with Adobe is, I have two packages because they kind of break it up on you. They have one that they say is it includes everything. It includes, Photoshop, and it includes all of your basic Adobe applications. But then they split it up on the 3D side. The all-inclusive subscription plan does not include your 3D apps. That's another plan. All right. So right now I'm paying for two different plans, the 3D side of it and then the Photoshop side of it. So it adds up. All right. So you don't have to go down that road. You can go on Steam and do a search for a Substance Painter, and you can pay one price for it. Right. So you'll pay like $100 and some or however much it costs. Now, the only difference there is you're locked into that version, right? So you won't be updating to the next version. So when Adobe comes out with the next version of Substance Painter, you're kind of stuck where you're at unless you pay the upgrade fee, which is fine because you really only use, I don't know how to say it. You don't really have much of a use for the latest and greatest. As long as it does what you wanted to do, you should be able to use that version of Substance Painter for an awfully long time before you feel the need to update. All right. Now, the other thing I was meant to mention about the subscription plan is how it makes it affordable. So basically, I have every Adobe application, right? And if I was to pay cash for all of those, forget it. Like back in the day, Adobe full price for like, say, Photoshop, they wanted anywhere from, say, $900, $1,000 for that thing. So it's expensive. So if you put a price tag on each one of those applications, I could never afford that out of pocket, right? So it does make it affordable. So it does have its benefits, right? Even though I'm not a fan of the subscription model, not by any means, it does make it affordable. So it's not all bad. All right. So anyhow, like I said, if you're following along, go through, orient all of your faces to the direction, or your UVs to the direction where you want them. Make sure you're doing the rotation over here, that you have your mouse over top of the UV side and not over this side, because you can see what'll happen here is if I highlight one of these faces, all right, and then I rotate it 90 degrees, you can see what happened there, right? So no bueno, it doesn't look good. So make sure you're over top of the UV side when you do that. Okay. So take some time, go through, get your model just the way that you need it, or your face is pointed in the right direction. And that's it. I will meet up with you guys in just a little bit. I'm going to do the same thing over here, and we'll move on to the next step. Alrighty, I am finished up. How did you guys make out? Did you make out okay? You have everything oriented correctly. You rotated all of your UVs that you needed to get everything looking nice, sort of like what I have here. You will notice that I do have some of my faces, like these UVs here. This one's facing to the side, right? As compared to lettering, I mean, as compared to these that are right side up. All right. For me, if you look at my UV mesh here, right, when I select one of these, right, it's vertical. It's going up and down here. They all are. So what matters to me the most on these foundation pieces is that they're at least all facing in the same direction. Now, I could spin them if I wanted to, and I may end up doing that depending on how things shake out when we pack our mesh, which is going to be our next step. It's called mesh packing. All right. So if you look at what we have going on with our mesh here now, all right, everything is kind of a mess, right? So at least before it was semi-organized, and now it's not. We rotated things and things are overlapping and they're just not looking as good as they did before, right? So we're going to pack it. We're going to get everything nice and neat once again. And then this way we can move on to the next step. Now, Blender does have a few applications or add-ons, or I don't know, functionality, however you want to call it, that allows you to pack the mesh. All right, and we'll get into that. I'll show you the ones that are native to Blender. Now, I do use a paid add-on. I use something called UV Packmaster, and I didn't check. I'll have to check the website. I'll make sure I leave a link for you guys in the description. As far as I can remember, I think they're up to UV Packmaster 3, and it's not too cheap. I want to say it's like the $30-$40 range, somewhere in there. So that may not be something that's up your alley. That little bit of a price tag. All right, but it's not necessary. So don't feel like you're not going to get the job done as well because you don't have like this paid version that costs X amount of dollars. Right? UV Packmaster, which you can see here, it has a lot of bells and whistles. Right? So it has a ton of stuff. Honestly, it's overkill for what I do. Right? It has more options than what I really need. Now, if you're getting into like character creation or sculpting, is something like that, this is going to come in really, really handy. I bought it just mostly to play around with, and you never know where this crazy road is going to take me, right? Where I'm going to end up in my my Blender adventure. All right, so I bought it just for that reason, but it's completely unnecessary, right? Blender will be, maybe it does a slightly bit of a better job, but everything that Blender does by, natively by default is just fine, right? It's not a problem. So you'll be okay without it. Now, one thing you could do at this step right here before we get to packing, it all depends. Your mesh should be relatively, or your textures should be mostly the same resolution. And what I mean by that is if you look at the roof here, right? So you'll see, like the F6, F7, the lettering. If it's really big on your roof and say really small, they look different sizes, basically, is what I'm getting at. So if these textures look like they're all different sizes, somehow your resolution is off. They shouldn't. It should all look pretty much like what we have here. They should all be the same size. All right. If for some reason they're not, you can straighten that out with the texel density add-on. All right. Now, I went over this in a previous video, so hopefully you guys are at least somewhat familiar with texel density and how to get that straightened out and get everything, looking nice again. You get everything the same size, basically. So you could use that, or you could readjust. You can use texel density just to readjust, right? So if you want to make better use of your space to try to squeeze a little more resolution out of it, you could use the texel density checker for that as well. And I'm going to leave that up to you guys, to research that, to either go back and watch the previous video that has texel density checker included, or to just look on the website or a quick, YouTube search or something like that. My guess is that you probably shouldn't need it. I can't think of a time where I really had to come in here, after getting my textures, these color grids, after getting them put in place, that I needed to come back with the texel density and straighten things out. It looks pretty good the way it is. Everything is looks okay. All right, so getting into UV packing. So all we're going to do is we're going to straighten out this mesh. We're going to get it to look really nice. All right. Now, the one thing that's important is we don't want to rotate anything anymore. Okay. So we have everything rotated. It's where we want it. We don't, that's it. We don't want anything, to spin out of place. I don't know if I worded that quite correctly, but we don't want to rotate it anymore. All right. So if we go up to UV, all right, we have, where is it here? Pack islands, right? So they have something called pack islands. Now, the one thing that you want to take note of right here, we have scale and rotate. Rotate, we want to uncheck. All right. Because what that'll do is on its own, it will rotate all of your UVs to make the best use of the space. Right. So if it feels like, this part of the house needs to get spun 90 degrees to be able to fit into the UV space, the best, that's what it's going to do. And we don't necessarily want to do that. All right. Now, under extreme circumstances, if you're trying to make the absolute best possible use of your space, we would let it rotate it, and we would just, straighten that out in another program like Instamat or Substance Painter. But we're not going to do that. It's not that. It's only a house. It's not that vitally important. So make sure rotate is off. And the other thing is your margin. You want to bump that up a little bit to like 0.003. Okay. And from there, you just want to select all your mesh. Oops. and go to UV, pack islands. Oops. Let me do that again. I may not have I might not have even needed to select them all. That's just a force of habit that I'm selecting all of my UVs. All right, and then that's it. You just select OK, and you can see what it did. So it straightened out our house for us, really nice and neat. Our UV mesh looks good, and it did not mess with any of our current, textures, our faces over here. Everything still looks really nice, right? UVs are all exactly where we want them. Okay, so that's one option for you guys. All right. The other one is you can see something here called Magic UV. This also is native to Blender, but it's not enabled by default. All right. So what you need to do is you need to go up into your add-ons. So go to Preferences, Edit Preferences, go to your add-ons and just search UV. All right. And you'll see Magic UV will come up, and you'll just have to check that box to enable it. And then again, it's basically the same thing. Go into UV manipulation, and then you see this pack UV extension. And then from here, let's see here, it doesn't give you the option for the island margins, and it also does not give you the option for rotation, which is fine. You could just go into pack UVs, and you can see that it didn't mess with any of your rotations, right? It kept them exactly where you had them, and that's fine. That's what you were looking to do. And it did a pretty respectable job of packing the UV, packing the mesh. All right, so we're all good there. Now, like I said, I use UV Packmaster, so we'll go in there and we'll do it one last time with UV Packmaster. Like I said, it's not a huge difference. It's just a lot more bells and whistles, right? So I'll take off the rotation enable, and then I usually normalize my my UVs, and it's basically the scale, right? It would do the same thing that texel density would do. So if anything is off, it just kind of makes everything the same scale, right? And it just makes it a little bit easier when I get into Substance Painter and I start texturing these things. All right. And then from there, we just pack, and that's it. So you can see it all basically did the same thing. They all did the same thing. Now you can see here with UV Packmaster and all the rest of them, it will leave some space up here at the top of your mesh. All right. And what's going on there is I have like one or two longer pieces. So whatever this is, what I could do is I can check these longer pieces, like these pieces over here, or maybe this piece here. I can see what they are, first of all. If I can highlight that again. I had it highlighted the first time, and now I can't get it. There we go. All right. So I can go into my main mesh, and I can figure out what exactly that is. And it looks like it's part of a rain spout. So this is what I was talking about earlier, that I may still end up rotating some things depending on how it looks inside of my UV space once everything is packed. All right. And if I spin that 90 degrees, that'll clear up some more room for me, right? Because right now it's trying to stand it vertically, and it's taking up that little bit of extra room. Right. And I could spin that on its side, as well as, these pieces over here. I could spin these on their side as well. I'm not sure what that is. It looks like it's part of the roof trim. Right. So I can spin those, and that'll help clear up a little bit of room. But I'm not going to be so anal about this one. I'm just going to kind of leave things the way they are. And I think, we'll be just fine. All right. So that's all you're really looking to do. Just pack your mesh. And like I said, be aware of your islands. Now, I think I mentioned in one of my last videos what the islands were. And the islands are basically just everything that you unwrapped, right? It's that one piece. This piece here is an island, right? And then the next piece that you unwrap is an island. And that margin is the distance between these islands. That's as close as you want to let them get, is 0.003. All right. Now, if you want to select entire islands, I think that's what I couldn't remember in one of the videos. I think I was pushing P or something like that. It's L. If you hover over top of an island and press the letter L, it will select the entire island for you. All right. So if you have anything that you're working on where you need all the pieces for that island, you can just select L. I think I might have went over. I'm not sure if I mentioned it or not in the previous video. There's also ways that you can straighten out your UVs. right? And I think I did go over that, but I maybe didn't show you how to do it. I'm not really good at it, right? So I can't quite remember everything that it entails to straighten one out. And I don't really have anything here that needs straightening that I can show you. And this would be all part of the process of when you're trying to organize your mesh here, when you're going through and you're looking for pieces that, maybe aren't quite right. So this here is something that could probably be straightened. Now, like I said, I'm not good at it. So let's see if I can do it really quickly without wasting too much time. Let's see. We'll right click on it. Yeah, I'm not sure. I think there's one that says select. I know it's not straighten. Yeah, that's not straighten. I don't want to waste too much time because I can't remember exactly how to do it. Yep, not sure. It's been a while. I rarely use this function is why I can't remember. But it does come in handy. It's something that you want to look up. So if you're interested, maybe do some Googling, like how to straighten a UV, right? And it'll show you, I'm sure you'll find something that'll show you how to do it. All right. Really quickly, I just want to have a look. But anyhow, what you would do is what you end up doing is you end up selecting one piece that's fairly straight to begin with, right? And once that's selected, I'm just looking really quick to see if I missed something. Once that's selected, I think you'll be able to either right click and hit straighten. I'm not sure if it's one of these, like the straighten, or if there's something else you should be clicking. But what it'll do is it'll take all three of these pieces and stand them up vertically in a straight line, right? So it doesn't have this shape to it anymore. And it comes in really handy depending on, what you're working on. On my newest model, my current model that I'm working on, it has the frame. Some windows are they're circular windows, right? So they're more of an oval, but it looks a little weird inside of my UV space, the way it's the way it's unwrapping and the way it's taking up room inside the UV space. So I was working on straightening them, and it works well. I just, for the life of me, I can't, off the top of my head, I can't remember how I was straightening UVs. But if that's something you're interested in, definitely do a Google on that. Look it up and practice with it. Take something that's a little out of whack and practice straightening it out. All right. And what I'll do in the meantime is, I always feel bad when I bring something up and then I can't remember how to do it. That's not part of the process here, but it does come in handy in case you ever have need. But like I said, what I'll do is I'll look it up, and then maybe in a future video, we'll go over how to straighten UVs. All right. Because it's something that's worth knowing. It really is. I just wanted to throw that out there. All right. So like I said, now that these guys are all packed up, everything looks pretty nice. It's going to pay to double check your mesh once again, just to make sure you didn't miss anything, any seams that need to be marked, or maybe you have any UVs that haven't been rotated. Give everything a quick once over just to make sure we're good. And we'll be moving on to the next step. All right. So unfortunately, we're not going to be moving on to that step in this video. That's probably going to be the next video. All right. So what the next step is going to be is, for me anyhow, like I said, for this particular workflow, we're going to get into vertex coloring. All right. And I'll just quickly explain what that is each one of these materials, we're going to give it its own color. All right. So red, green, blue. And I use text tools for that. So I have this thing here called Color ID. And this is why I had mentioned earlier, at least I think I mentioned it. I'm recording this on different days, so I'm not sure what I mentioned previously. But text tools here is only capable of going up to 20 vertex colors. So that's why I try to keep my materials like 20 or lower. And I did go over, I believe I'm up to 22 in this. So I'm going to have to give it a couple extra colors, which is fine. Not a big deal, but you're also not locked into that 20 colors, right? You can have an infinite number of vertex colors. So you're not locked in. This program here, this add-on, just makes it super easy to get the coloring done. And that's why I stick with it, right? So there's a bit of a different process for your vertex colors, and I'm just not good at it. I never really researched it, or I never played with it enough to get really good at it, which is something I probably should do. Vertex coloring just was never really my thing. Once I discovered this and realized how easy it was, that was it. So, I have some learning to do myself. It's not just you guys, it's me as well. There's definitely things I need to brush up on and get better at. And vertex coloring is definitely one of those things. All right. But you want to look into text tools as well. I'll try to provide links to any of these add-ons. I'll try to put them all in the description. So you guys can go and find these tools. Text tools, I believe, is free. I don't think this is a paid add-on. I think text tools is free. Right. I don't think you'll find it on Blender Marketplace, though. I think it might be on GitHub, possibly. All right. So, but anyhow, once we get the colors put on here, that's going to be it. I'm going to go through here and I'm going to delete the materials, and we can move everything over into Substance Painter, start painting our house. Now you'll notice we do have two steps that are missing here, and that is our occluder mesh and our LODs are missing. All right. And I tend to make those afterwards. Once everything is done. Now, I've mentioned this as well before. Also, is that, I'm not a professional by any stretch of the imagination at Blender. So things that I'm doing, maybe they're not the optimal way, right? So it's not the best way to do it, but it's not the worst way to do it. It's just my way of doing it. Okay. So like I said, I'm sure there's professionals out there that have a much more optimized way of doing things more efficiently. And, they're pros. That's what makes them pros. All right. I managed to get the job done. Now I did question when I do the LODs, because the LODs need to be textured as well, that there is a bit of a better way that I could be doing them other than, my current way. And I'm going to look into that and see if I can't refine that method a little bit better, start doing them a little bit differently. Because for right now, the way I'm doing them probably isn't the most ideal way. Right. And the one thing I can't stand is passing along bad information to you guys. So I'll try to look into that a little bit and see if we can't, or I can't come up with a little bit of a better way to texture my LODs. Alrighty. I just noticed my door there is upside down. And the nice thing with some of these, like that door, since it's not square, it's rectangular, but I can actually spin that without having to repack my mesh. But generally, if you do make any changes here to your mesh, I'm not sure what this is here. If you make any changes to your UV space, you do want to repack everything, ideally. Right? And it doesn't hurt. I mean, I would, it doesn't hurt anything to go in here and just repack it. So that's probably something I should be doing anyhow. Right? Because you never know. You really never know what changed. Yeah, see this piece here. It's a good thing I did. This piece here, which I'm not sure what that is. But that ended up in the middle of the door there. And that's not where I wanted that. So repacking it, no big deal. So like I said, any changes that you make, you add a seam, you have to rotate a face, something like that. Make sure you're repacking the mesh. Okay. And that's it. I'm going to cut this video off right where it's at. Look forward to vertex painting in the next video, and we'll get everything exported out to Substance Painter or Instamat, whatever you happen to be using. Okay. And that's it. With that being said, I'm Bauer Brown, and I will see you on the next one.